Welcome to the Marc Steiner Show right here on the Real News Network, and I am Marc Steiner. It's good to have you all with us once again. You know, I've said this before. Anti-Semitism runs deep in human consciousness and throughout societies, as does its evil twin sister, racism, against Africans and the African diaspora. This is why it's so difficult for some people to separate political activity against Israel from anti-Semitism. However, let's deal with some reality here. Israel gets $3.1 billion in military aid, and for the last almost 51 years has been the occupying power in the West Bank and Gaza. And the myth of Israel being the benign beacon of democracy has been shattered by its oppression of the Palestinian people. And most recently, the Israeli human rights group B'Tselem, who's been on this show before many times, came out with a report that called Israel an apartheid state. And the International Criminal Court has now said and ruled that they can investigate Israel for war crimes. And as painful as it is for some of us who grew up with anti-Semitism and for Israel, it's a reality we must confront. We must address the reality that Israel is an oppressive, occupying power, and that to criticize it does not make one anti-Semitic. It's a difficult issue, but real. Now, I say all this once again because after Nathan J. Robinson, the editor of Current Affairs, who was, and the operative word here is was, a columnist for The Guardian, tweeted, tongue-in-cheek, quote, "Did you know that the U.S. Congress is not actually allowed to authorize any new spending unless a portion of it is directed towards buying weapons for Israel? It's the law." He then tweeted, to clarify his previous tweet, he said, quote, "Or if not actually the written law, then so ingrained in the political system as to functionally be indistinguishable from law." Well, he was then summarily called on the carpet by John Mulholland, editor-in-chief of the Guardian U.S., for peddling fake news, he was told. The next thing he knew, his calls and emails were not answered. His column was canceled, and he was let go. And Nathan J. Robinson, founder and editor of Current Affairs, author of numerous books, 7, I think, maybe more, and former Guardian columnist, joins us now. And Nathan, welcome to the Marc Steiner Show and Real News. Good to have you with us.
Hey, Mark. Nice to be with you.
Good to have you. So let me say he's joining us from New Orleans, and so we're all a bit jealous of that, even though he really can't party because Mardi Gras is canceled, but that's why he's with us today. So
I would not be here on any normal Mardi Gras day. I would be dressed colorfully and out in the streets.
As you should be, and I miss Mardi Gras myself. So, but let me also add before we start that John Mulholland has been a guest on the show, as have many Guardian writers in the past. So Mulholland wrote to you saying, quote, I think I have this right, you can tell me if it's wrong, saying that the only Jewish state controls the most powerful country in the world is clearly anti-Semitic. The myth of Jewish power informs murderous hatred. Delete this and apologize. So talk about that whole process and what the hell happened.
Yeah. So, as you say, the context of this was that Congress was passing a big COVID relief bill in December, and they were really stiffing Americans with the $600 checks. And at the same time, the COVID relief bill was going into a big kind of omnibus appropriations that contained $500 million in new military aid to Israel for buying different new components of different weapon systems, including the Iron Dome. And so I, like many others, found this extremely frustrating, right? That even when we can't get COVID relief, the giving weapons to Israel is such a sort of normal part of American politics that no politician thinks twice about it. It's not even controversial. So there's an underlying point that the tweet is designed to make, right? It is a joke, but it is a joke making a point, which is that, like, essentially, is there some kind of law that, like, we always have to buy weapons for COVID relief? Oh yes, no, but make sure we buy the weapons for Israel. And so that was the point that was being made. And as you say, Israel, the weapons. Israel is a human rights abusing country, right? So this is not just buying weapons for any country. This is buying weapons for a country that is in flagrant violation of international law. But we still don't hesitate to just keep sending money for weapons. Anyway, so John Mulholland, the editor of The Guardian, who I've interacted with, I think, once, swoops down and emails me, and I get the email in my inbox, title, the subject line, private and confidential, Well, not anymore, but it's what he wanted, right? He wanted me to not tell anyone what he was saying. And he said, essentially, now the bit you quoted, it's not clear whether that's from him or whether he's like quoting someone, but he says essentially in the email, he says, basically, this is anti-Semitic. You're suggesting that Jews control the government by saying that the United States always buys weapons for Israel. And I, being a coward, immediately deleted my tweet. Well, I earned $15,000 a year from the Guardian, right? So I could tell from his tone that my job, and I didn't have like a guarantee of employment, right? I am a columnist, but they don't give, even though they're a union company, they don't give their columnists contracts. And so that means they could terminate me anytime for any reason and just say, like, we're not renewing your column, not we're firing you, we're not renewing you. Because every additional pitch, right, is accepted anew. So I thought, I don't want to lose this money. So I deleted it and I sent a completely insincere apology saying, I'm terribly sorry about this. I didn't realize because he called it fake news. He said, there's no law that says we have to do this. And I said, well, it's a joke. But I said, I'm sorry if it's fake news. Anyway, he sent me a reply that suggested that we were cool. But then I got a message from my editor, who's the one I actually work with, who said, you need to tell me what you tweeted because John Mulholland seems very, very mad and I need to smooth this over. And I said, well, I don't know because I deleted it, but here's the best of my recollection. My editor said, I'm going to try and smooth it over. And then for the next few weeks, they stopped accepting my pitches. I'm sending stuff in. Usually they would accept not all of it, but quite a lot of it. Nothing. I don't even hear a response. My editor would usually be calling me to say, hey, would you write about X? Nothing. No response. And then finally I say, to my editor, can we have a call? I need to talk to you. So I talk to my editor, and my editor says, I need to straighten this out with John Mulholland. I would have been accepting your pitches except for this thing with John, so because of the tweet. And then my editor has a meeting with John Mulholland, called me the next day and says he's decided to discontinue your column and probably won't want to work with you for a very long time.
So let me ask you this. I mean, first of all, I've seen your work in the Guardian. I read the Guardian regularly, and two things. A, you don't write about Israel or Palestine and the Middle East very much at all. If I can remember,
I don't think I ever have. No,
I don't think I can't remember one. The Guardian is a paper that tilts left.
Yeah.
And I've seen the numerous articles in the Guardian that have been critical of Israel, that have
Yes.
that actually have given Palestinians a voice. So,
Yes.
What do you think? What's the dynamic here? What do you think really happened? Why do you think this happened?
Yes, the Guardian. This is what's interesting about it. Actually, is that the Guardian is not a reactionary, far-right Zionist newspaper, right? They are a liberal left paper. I am an open socialist, and I write for them. The editor of Jacobin, Bhaskar Sankara, writes for them. So they do permit criticism of Israel in their pages. I think that what it is they want to be able to screen what their writers say about Israel-Palestine very, very carefully because they are paranoid about not being accused of anti-Semitism. And I think what happened was if a few people on Twitter or I was told that someone in the UK office got mad, or influential donors to The Guardian, whoever it is, part of or a few subscribers, some part of the constituency says this is anti-Semitism. The Guardian does not really care whether it actually is anti-Semitic, whether that's a fair complaint. The fact is that they want to make sure that their columnists are all in line on Israel-Palestine. So you can criticize it, but only editorially approved criticism. If you stray from that and you do anything that upsets people, you're gone. You're out. Because they want to make sure, John Mulholland wants to make sure that you can tell he basically suggested that I had wandered afield and started saying things that were my own opinions rather than official Guardian approved editorial line.
But as a columnist, the nature of a columnist is to write your opinions.
Well, the nature of a columnist is to submit your opinions, and then John Mulholland will decide which of your opinions are Guardian worthy.
Gotcha. No,
So,
but it seems to me that, I mean, in looking at what happened here, that, I mean, I was thinking about when I read the tweets, I was thinking of how difficult it is to start with to be tongue in cheek when you're tweeting, because people,
yes.
I found that myself. It's difficult, and people can take things you say in a different way because you think you're being cute and funny, but then people take it seriously and you get attacked.
Yes.
And but having said that, what do you? Let me come back to what I asked earlier before I go over somewhere else in conversation. It's just, I mean, what was the underlying dynamic here? Do you think? I mean, why do you think at this moment what you wrote was fairly innocuous? I mean, in the sense that it was not obviously serious. You weren't saying that. You weren't saying in tongue in cheek. So why do you think they took it so seriously? Why do you think you at this point were the one who was scapegoated in this process when other people have not been?
Well, I can't really speculate, but as I say, I think my tweet was provocative in a certain way, because I mean, I did critique. I mean, it was touching on a very controversial subject area. The Guardian writes about it, but as I say, they write about it very, very carefully. They write about it, and I'm sure that any article that is published on Israel Palestine is combed over 50 times to make sure that nobody could possibly ever plausibly accuse you of saying anything untoward or unfair toward Israel, because there is this climate around discussion of Israel where we know that anything that can be construed as bigotry will be, because that, I mean, that's a great way to make people not want to talk about something, is to lodge accusations of bigotry against them. I mean, the United States actually, in fact, I remember in the post 9/11 climate, any criticism of the United States was called America hatred. You know, you were singling out America. Why don't you talk about other countries that do surveillance? Why don't you talk about, why do you talk about America? You must just hate America. And it's very, very convenient because it makes people defensive, and they're like, no, I don't hate America. So the Guardian, being a paper that is sometimes critical of Israel, is also a paper that constantly has to, because of this climate, be proving that it isn't anti-Semitic, be proving that it isn't singling out Israel by publishing lots of other stuff. So John Mulholland, as the editor, is extremely sensitive to accusations like this and wants to make sure he cuts any columnist who could potentially cause public controversy on the subject of Israel.
I mean, this also seems to be part of a broader spectrum of things that are happening at the moment, where, and I think you wrote about this in a piece for the Current Affairs, where in response to this, that BDS demonstrations and BDS actions are criminalized, where other things are not. I mean, there is a whole process here where there's a battle going on around that. And I was thinking of two quotes. I'll read these two quotes. One is, this is interesting. Injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. Unless Palestinian human rights are respected, we cannot fight anti-Semitism. Now, if you'd written that and put that in The Guardian, you've been accused of being anti-Semitic. And it was said by Congressman Andy Levin from Michigan, who was writing saying we have to change our policies towards the Middle East. So I mean, this is what I'm saying. This is really, because anti-Semitism runs so deep in Western society.
Yes,
it's easily used which it does. It can easily, so it's easily used when you're being anti-Israeli, or if I say something, then I'm a self-hating Jew.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a really difficult subject, and you got swept up in this. But that's interesting to me, because if you had made that quote that Andy Levin made, it would have been called anti-Semitic.
Yeah, I mean, I have a very strong sense that not anymore now that I don't have a newspaper job, but you have to be careful, right? Now I don't have to be careful because nobody could punish me for my tweets. But it's true that even before I sent this tweet, and you can see I was being careful and cautious, because I knew. The whole reason that I sent that second tweet going, it's not actually law, not a law, people, joke, big flashing sirens, this is a joke, because I am aware that it is very easy to characterize things this way. And so I had already watched my speech quite carefully on Israel-Palestine. I am not Jewish. That makes it hard. That means I don't have a way to an easy way to defend myself against charges of anti-Semitism. Although your identity does not really affect whether the remarks you made are bigoted. But it's true that I don't have a very strong connection to Israel or Palestine. So, I try and watch what I say. I try and say things that I think are factual. I, occasionally make a joke, but I try and screen myself very, very cautiously. And I was willing to continue doing that, as you can see from the email that I sent to the Guardian editor, where I suggested, tell me what the guidelines here are. Tell me what writers can and cannot say about Israel-Palestine. And as a Guardian columnist, I will have to stick to those guidelines.
There are a couple of things I really want to touch on before the time we have together. And the other quote I was thinking about, the Guardian has attacked Corbyn on different levels as being anti-Semitic, as we all know. And they had a headline that said, Jeremy Corbyn appears to compare Israeli government to Islamic State. What Corbyn actually said was, our Jewish friends are no more responsible for the actions of Israel and Netanyahu government than our Muslim friends are for those various self-styled Islamic states or organizations. Yeah. And so I think this is really important, because it is the twist that's going on here to make a critique of Palestinian oppression an anti-Semitic act. While I think there are probably many anti-Semites who love going after Israel, criticizing Israel is not anti-Semitic. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, and yes. So this really begs for a much deeper discussion, I think, on the part of the Guardian and others.
Yes. No, I think that's right. I mean, yes, anti-Semitism is very pervasive, right? I mean, we've gotten at Current Affairs, right? I mean, I get letters to the editor. We've gotten anti-Semitic emails before. I know that there are crackpots out there. It's a real form of bigotry, and so that is, as you said earlier, what makes it such a powerful accusation, and what makes people want to be careful. Jeremy Corbyn's quote there that you cited was made hugely controversial on the logic that he's comparing Israel to ISIS. Right. Where what he's actually doing is comparing the process by which people hold people responsible for the actions of ISIS to the process by which people hold people responsible for the actions of Israel. But I noticed that the logic, if you think about the underlying logic of the argument that Mulholland makes in his email to me, it really would end up insulating Israel from criticism, because he says, essentially, you're saying that Israel is powerful, has power over the United States government policy. Israel is the only Jewish state. Therefore, you are perpetuating the myth of Jewish power, which means that you're not able to, by that logic, any attempt to point out any power that Israel might have in shaping United States foreign policy becomes, on that theory, inherently anti-Semitic. So it's very convenient. And if I was a supporter of Israel or the government of Israel, I would definitely push this argument as much as I could, because it would be extremely effective in making sure that nobody could point out when the state of Israel was doing things that were powerful and oppressive.
So beyond what this has done to you personally, which is a slight to your character at the very least, that you've lost your column at the Guardian and your $15,000 a year. But so I'm curious. I mean, where do you think, as a journalist on the left, where do you think this discussion goes next? Where would you take this discussion next, as the editor of Current Affairs?
Yeah. I mean, I don't consider myself a journalist, actually. I consider myself just an opinion writer.
Okay.
And
right. Yep.
But I try and tell people I'm not a journalist because I think then you do get all these questions about whether a journalist ought to be objective. So I don't pretend so that I don't have to be objective. Because the place I want to take the discussion next is, okay, where I don't want to take it is a discussion about what is called cancel culture. Which is, is there just too much sensitivity and to things on Twitter, which maybe in a general sense, but I think in a very specific sense, what I want to point out is that I was not fired just because what I said was controversial. It was because it was controversial about Israel-Palestine, where there is a unique problem of facing free speech, and that there is a reason that there is a problem. There is a reason that there is an attempt to shut down critics of the Israeli state, and it is because at this very moment in time, the place where we are, Israel is trying to consolidate control over Palestine. Essentially, there was once a peace process. There was once a kind of hope that there would be two equal states, or there would be some kind of joint sovereignty. That is really no longer the case. What has happened is essentially that Israel has won through the complete dominance of the Palestinian people, and so there is an effort to consolidate that control through ever increasing new settlements in the occupied territories, and to make sure that people stop talking about the Palestinian cause, which once they did. And as the Biden administration comes in, I mean, the Trump administration made sure it never challenged Israel on anything. There is going to be an effort to make sure that the Biden administration does not make an issue of this, and that it is preoccupied on domestic affairs and essentially leaves the Trump administration's policies on Israel alone and in place for fear of stoking controversy. And what my firing does is it makes it less likely that anyone who has a job to lose is going to want to wade into or go near this issue. And that matters a lot. Right? It's not just because I like my comfy, cushy columnist job. It's because if this can't be talked about, then human rights abuses and the violation of international law are not going to be discussed right at the moment where we need to be discussing them more rather than less.
I hope that, though, that the rise in this country, in all sectors of America, to really question this policy, seeing Jewish members of Congress, Democrats, question this policy, seeing the rise of organizations from liberal left groups to left-wing groups who are taking this on. I think that it's maybe its time has come to become a central point of discussion, which I think it has to be. And I think that your firing, they won't say it's a firing, but your firing from the Guardian is just emblematic of how intense the struggle is becoming.
Yeah. I think so, and I think it's very concerning that it happened at the Guardian, right? Yeah. If it happened at the Wall Street Journal, you might expect it. And people say, "Oh, well, the Guardian, they publish stuff critical of Israel," and I reply, exactly. That's exactly the point. That is what is so scary: is that the paper that should be the opposition paper has become so afraid to speak and to allow its writers to speak for fear of incurring spurious anti-Semitism charges, that we can't be honest, and we all have to watch what we say. And every writer who is still there at the Guardian now is on notice because of my firing, that the editor is watching their tweets on this issue, and that the moment they say anything that causes controversy, the paper will not stand by them. The paper will ditch them, and furthermore, the paper will lie about them. Because the paper, in its statement about me, first they said I wasn't fired because they don't give their columnists contracts, which just means like nobody here has job security, which is a funny defense. But second, they also said something in direct contradiction to what they said to me. They said, "Oh, we welcome to work with Mr. Robinson in the future." Well, they told me they didn't welcome me to work with him in the future. And I have been told that people talking to people in the Guardian are being told that I was not fired because of this tweet, which is again a direct contradiction of what they told me. So essentially, they'll fire you, they'll lie about it. And that is scary. If you are a writer who depends on your job, who needs your career, right? You're not going to want to irritate John Mulholland on this issue. Guardian writers have not been coming out publicly in support of me, right? And I would, I mean, I like to think I would actually, because but I can understand the pressure, right? I mean, I would be able to, because I have another job that is paying my salary, so I don't have the fear of becoming a freelancer. But I get why they are staying silent, because they're all afraid of the editor too.
Well, I think you make some really powerful points here, and I would encourage folks watching us today, listening to us today, however you're doing this, to think this through. And you can write to me here at mss@therealnews.com and let me know what you think about that. But also write the Guardian and let them know what you think about the sacking of Mr. Robbins. I think that's something that really should not just be left lingering. And Nathan J. Robbins
is very important.
It is really important. It's beyond you, is why it's so important.
That's why it doesn't matter. I'm not trying to get my job back. What it is trying to protect the other writers there. The more backlash that he gets, the better protected other Guardian writers are going to be in the future.
And we have to protect the free press, no matter where it comes from. That's really important that our voices are heard. And Nathan J. Robinson, both thank you for the work you do with current affairs. Thank you for joining us here today. I look forward to numerous conversations in the future.
Yes, thanks. It was tremendous fun and nice to meet you.
Great to meet you too. Enjoy Mardi Gras as much as you can today.
I will.
Fat Tuesday, I should say. Take care and thank you. And thank you all for watching. And please, you see, scroll across the bottom, mss@therealnews.com. Write to me. Let us know what you think about this. Give us your ideas and thoughts. I'm always looking forward to hearing that. So I am Marc Steiner here for the Real News Network. Thank you all for joining us. Please take care.